The idea of a Sam Darnold extension has kind of fallen by the wayside, but maybe it's time to reconsider. They're 10-2. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. Appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers at FanDuel can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if that bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is Twitter Tuesday today. That means I am taking your questions as submitted to me via Twitter or even Blue Sky. You can also send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com whenever you want. You can also fill out the Google form in the show notes if you have a question. That is in the description to any podcast. First question that I'm going to take comes from Eric the Red, who asks, pretend for a moment that J.J. McCarthy does not exist and Sam Darnold is playing at the last year of a deal with Minnesota. If his price is for a multi-year extension is top 5 QB money, would you extend him? So the way you've framed this question has made it a lot easier to answer. I think that's a no. Top 5 QB money is like $50 million. I don't think Sam Darnold has risen to that level. I think the turnover is just too much for me to feel comfortable with that. But pretty simple. I mean, that's the Jordan Love, who's even going to be the next guy to get that money? Nobody from the 2022 class, unless it's Purdy, and that's a little awkward. But in the world where J.J. McCarthy does not exist, I'd definitely be a lot more tempted to do that, right? Because then you wouldn't have that alternative to fall back on. And honestly, the existence of J.J. McCarthy is the main reason why a Sam Darnold extension is still a really unlikely thing. So, the Vikings are still dead set on this kid. They're still all in on this kid. At least, I don't know. I have no reason to believe that has changed just because of a few pretty good games that are still, this Arizona game is not the game that's going to change anybody's mind, right, about Sam Darnold. It was a very clutch fourth quarter. He did just enough, but it was not good for a lot of it. So, yeah, I think that a lot more still needs to happen. I still kind of holding steadfast to the principle I entered the season with regard to this question, which is you kind of need to exactly win the Super Bowl. And then we talk about it, and even then he might Nick Foles his way off in free agency, but it's still worth rediscussing and talking about and kind of checking in on if your standards are the same. I think there's also this kind of growing anxiety about J.J. McCarthy's knee, and I don't think that that's appropriate. Again, the meniscus surgery that he got, the recovery of that would have him back before the draft. Before free agency opens, J.J. McCarthy will be back to full strength, even with the little extra procedure that he got, what was that, a couple of weeks ago, still back well before any team activities will happen. So I would expect him back for OTAs and all that stuff. And even if he wasn't, even if it were a TJ Hawkinson situation, it's okay, well then it's delays it a couple of games, a few games, right? Half a season. It's still a short-term issue that you're looking for a long-term solution for. David Kahn asks, from a strategic standpoint, how is kicking the field goal to go up 6 in London versus the Jets different from what happened on Sunday? Besides the obvious, I assume you mean that the Vikings got to stop in New York and the Cardinals did not. But I think the big difference is 4th and 7 versus 4th and 4. So for those that don't remember, that's how that game went down in London. The Vikings went up 23-17 on a field goal kick. It was a 4th and 7 just outside the red zone. And then the Jets got their chance and drove down the field, but then they threw an interception. Same thing as last week with the Vikings and Cardinals. Cardinals go up 6, Vikings go score 23-22, and then the Vikings get their stop on the way back. The difference, I think the biggest difference with the analytical models, if you wanted to just lean on those for these decisions, is 4th and 7 versus 4th and 4. A lot of those models start to really, really get skittish around the 4th and 6, 4th and 7 range. So I would not be surprised to see those, the mathematical models say, yeah, a 4th and 4 is good, is a good go here, but a 4th and 7 isn't. I also don't know how much those models respect the like being up 6 is technically worse than being up 3 because it makes the other offense aggressive thing. And I would guess some of them are based on historical data, which is, includes a bunch of games that went down just like the Vikings Cardinals game did. And some of them are more about like the EPA of it, the field position of it, the like sort of more objective positioning element of it, which wouldn't take that kind of thing into account. Squeaks asks, why are backup tight ends stealing touchdowns from my beloved Justin Jefferson? Because they're open, man. Are you mad about the touchdown? It's because it was a score. Go to touchdown. And Ryan Higgins asks a similar one. Why in the NFL has JJ never been the best at scoring TDs? In college his senior year, he had a bunch. So Justin Jefferson touchdowns is not like a problem, right? Like he's got 5 so far this year. He had 5 last year. He's usually good for somewhere between 5 and 10. That's a lot of touchdowns. That's going to land yourself at least in the top half of the league, if not the top like quarter of the league. It's right now tied for 6th league wide, or in like the 6th lowest or 6th highest bundle of people. There's like 15 people above him, above the people with 5. But I mean, in the red zone, it's not. I think the concern that you were asking about here is like, does he have a problem in the red zone? No, he has no problem in the red zone. It's that there's that much less space, and it's that much easier to put a double on him, to put a bracket on him, and then that leaves somebody like Johnny Munt or Jordan Addison or whatever wide open. That gives you the chance to do man beaters. But it's the same reason that defenses want to take him away. I mean, this is just the way that teams play the Vikings. You're going to have a bracket on Justin Jefferson. Those brackets tighten up in the red zone, and it's going to be harder to find the ball to him, but that's also punishable in other ways. But also the Vikings have like a red zone problem in their own right with all their short yardage issues that I think goes well beyond Jefferson. AG School asks, seems like we miss pace on defense, especially in the run game. Looked like we went with Metellus a lot as the second linebacker against a good running team. What could the plan be moving forward? So this was really interesting. The Cardinals did a goal line, or they did like a lot of jumbo package. On 1st and 10s, they'd bring in their 13 personnel like it was 4th and 1. And the Vikings had to respond with that personnel in kind, so they used their goal line personnel. That meant 4 defensive tackles: Harrison Phillips, Bullard, Tillery, and Jalen Redmond. That's why we saw so much Jalen Redmond time, because they had to be in that goal line package. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was kind of the Cardinals' move. Like, yeah, we're going to bring in our 3 tight ends, and they're all blocking tight ends, and we feel good about those guys. And that's going to bring in everybody's 4th string defensive tackle. And like that guy is going to be a dude from the Arlington Renegades that, that didn't make a team last year. That I think is probably part of their like core philosophy is Arizona. And I think there's merit to that for sure. But that's part of it. But what it also does is it sort of replaces Ivan Pace for you, because you can use, you've got 6 D-line on the field now. Somebody's got to come off. And well, that guy might have been Ivan Pace anyways. So I think that might have sort of minimized that impact in this one. But at the same time, yeah, now you have Josh Metellus doing the linebacker role. I was complaining about that basically the whole time Cashman was out. So we have to kind of go back to that, or go to the Van Ginkel off the ball thing with Dallas Turner playing at the edge, or Kamu Grugier-Hill, or they started using Jamin Davis more in like third down stuff as like a blitz only guy. And I'm sure his role could expand as he like learns the defense more, but it's a way to get his feet wet. All of those are like options, and it might be game plan, or it might just be depending on what's working and stuff. But in this one, it was kind of determined for them. Next one comes from the 14-yard line that tackled Danny Dimes, which is a great name. And also, I should mention, this person has had that name since that funny Daniel Jones run where he got like turf monstered a couple years ago. Like that, this name has been, and now he's on the Vikings. Very funny full circle moment. Anyways, he says he compiled some stats. With Ingram as right guard, so that's up to week 10. The Vikings were 14th in dropback EPA, 19th in rush EPA, and 14th in EPA per play. With Reisner as the guard, weeks 11 through 13, 8th in dropback EPA, 30th in rush EPA, and 16th in total EPA per play. And basically asking, like, does this mean anything? Did they make the right decision? So I think those are probably bad metrics to measure a guard by. Like an on-off split kind of makes some sense, but it's not like a basketball on-off split where there's always some signal. Like the reason the Vikings EPA per play is around average instead of as high as kind of everything else is statistically for them is turnovers, and that's on Sam Darnold. Has very little to do with who's at guard, unless like except for one where like that specific pressure caused that specific pick, and that does not explain all of them. So that's part of it. But also it's just, I don't know, you get small sample stuff. There's a lot more going on than the play at right guard at an offense. It's not like offenses are constant from week to week to week, or even from play to play to play. So I wouldn't use these metrics to measure that. That said, a lot of people asked, how's Reisner doing versus Ingram? I'm going to kind of stick to the conclusion I came with from when I spent a lot of time a couple weeks ago covering this. I wrote an article, I did a Patreon, I did a whole episode on it. You can go listen to that episode for really in-depth breakdowns of how these guys play, and I don't think anything has really changed about that in the last couple of weeks. And I remain unconvinced is the way that I was. I need to see Dalton Reisner be significantly more consistent than Ingram, and right now it's pretty much even Steven to me in terms of pass blocking. And in run blocking, he doesn't get as much push as Ingram. I think they've lost an element there. So you need to be like more consistent in pass pro to a significant enough degree to paper over the run defense problem. I don't think we're there yet, but also there hadn't been enough time for me to get there yet. So I had to give it more time to do that. And it seems like we're sort of holding in neutral there. I've got a whole bunch more questions. I am going to rapid fire into a whole bunch of them coming up next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Prize Picks, the best place to play daily fantasy football. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players. They can be, you can even mix like football with basketball if you want, or you can just do like a whole bunch of tight ends, and whether they'll do better than their Prize Picks projection. If you don't like those projections, you can cycle through some demons and some goblins. Those are more aggressive or more conservative projections for more aggressive and more conservative payouts. So you can build all of those the way that you want on Prize Picks. For example, you can get Jefferson more than 83.5 yards, or Lamar Jackson more than 1.5 rushing touchdowns. Whatever it is, you can run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup at the Prize Picks app. Prize Picks, run your game. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Let's continue onward with this Twitter Tuesday mailbag. The next one comes from Weepiest Bobcat, who asks, we always talk about football IQ when it comes to coaches, but KOC as a head coach shows something I like to call football EQ, e.g. giving a game ball to a guy like Jones who is struggling, but the offense desperately needs to be confident. Would you agree? I guess I, as much as I can agree, I would agree. Although I do need to be pedantic on you because he didn't give Aaron Jones a game ball. It's just a shout out in the locker room. But the spirit of that still makes sense, right? Aaron Jones is very frustrated with himself with this fumbleitis issue he has. He has never had this issue in his career before. This is a new thing, and it seems to be weighing on him. And I think what Kevin O'Connell is identifying is that Aaron Jones needs support in that time, not to be yelled. He knows he did something wrong, right? You don't need to go hammer that point home again just to be punitive. And it's that to say, hey, no, we still believe in you, and you ought to believe in yourself, because as soon as you lose that confidence, the problem is just going to get worse, right? I think that's a pragmatic way to go about it. It's a caring way to go about it. And I think that's good leadership. But the thing is, not everybody is the same kind of player, and not all players are going to respond to exactly that. And I think the mark of a good leader is how you can, if you can manage 2 completely different styles of person to go toward the same goal, if you can be that sort of chameleon, that's really the mark of a good leader. And I think we've seen that with O'Connell, that he can get rough on him. Like I remember there was a locker room video, I think it was last year after all the turnovers, where he's just like laying into them. And you don't really hear that stuff a lot, and the Vikings don't put that stuff out a lot. Obviously the image is very curated. So it's nice to see that he's got that club in the bag, But yeah, that has been very important, especially when it comes to some of these like very overwhelmed and quarterbacks that he keeps getting really, really good performances out of. Bo Gus, I see what you did there, says, what would you suggest the Vikings do with Parker Romo when Reichard comes back? Yeah, I should mention that Reichard and Andrew DePaola have had their 21-day practice windows open from IR, so there's a chance they could come back and play for Atlanta. If not, then we're on Monday Night Football watch with the Bears, but that's something we got to watch over the week. And then what happens to the other two guys? They get cut. It's a dog-eat-dog world. They probably were signed with the understanding that, you know, you're here filling a role temporarily for like a month or so, depending on how long these guys are hurt. Obviously, everything is informality and audition for the real job, but you don't bring these guys in and not be honest and upfront with them. They probably, I mean, everybody knows the score, right? It's the NFL, it's a business. Nobody sits there thinking they're entitled to anything. So you probably cut them. Maybe you keep somebody on the practice squad if you're still worried about the injury with DePaula to hand. I doubt that that's the kind of thing that they'd be worried about, like lingering. And then with Reichard, it's like a hip thing. So if you're worried about that flaring back up, or if it could get exacerbated later, then maybe you would keep Parker Romo in the building, or you just keep his phone number on speed dial. And if Reichard gets hurt again, you go, hey, you want to run this back? That's probably how it goes. Joe Talent says, looked like the Cardinals hiked the ball a lot early. Was this almost a hurry up all day to help reduce the Vikings' defensive disguise? So that's a really interesting call. And Joe Talent has been an everydayer for a while. And I know you're an everydayer for a while because you caught my 2-minute thing, which is that when offenses are in a hurry, like they would be in 2 minutes, they're trying to save clock, right? You're not doing snap counts. You're not doing motions. You're not doing, can, changing play, doing all this crap at the line of scrimmage, giving the defense time to do its own version of those shifts and those realignments and those disguises and all that stuff. Everything has to be a little bit more straight up when you play it in a hurry. And I think that's part of the reason the Vikings have struggled in 2 minute. So if the Cardinals could get up to the line and live in 2 minute kind of tempo, then they can move the ball. I'm going to guess, Joe, that you saw that they were getting, I didn't pay attention to the play clock on this, so I'm taking your word for it that they were up on the play clock very quickly. I think that's just the operation being efficient, and maybe even the opposite, because the Cardinals use a lot of motion and they do a lot of complex stuff at the line of scrimmage. So I think they were just maybe giving them time to do that and not always using it all and just snap the ball, right? But even if they were in a hurry, it's like you're not going like tempo with hand signals, right? Like the true 2 minute hurry up drill, you have a very limited playbook for that because you have to communicate it in a different way with hand signals. It's too much memorization to have a full playbook there. So you're only going to have a limited menu, and teams can't do that all day unless they decide to be that team, and you don't really see that at the pro level. MN Sports Appreciator asks, what do you think of the decision to decline the holding penalty during yesterday's game? I believe you put the Cardinals at 3rd and 12 instead of 2nd and 20. So it was 3rd and 9, and I remember that specifically because I was having that exact argument with my dad. I was watching with him Thanksgiving weekend. I was visiting my parents, and I was having that exact argument with my dad because I thought you could get the choice is holding call on 2nd and 10. So you get a 2nd and 20, but the play was an incomplete pass, so you could have taken a 3rd and 10. I said take the penalty. He said decline. Because I think there are a lot of teams, and we'd seen the Cardinals do this in this game, and we saw them do it again, where they get way behind the chains and just turtle. Once you're 2nd and 19, you just turtle. And you're just like, all right, I'll just run the ball. I'll do something safe, and we'll just take our punt, right? Or we'll take our kick. Because I thought the Cardinals were prone to that, I thought, well, put them in 2nd and 20 and see if they turtle on you. This drive might be over. Versus a 3rd and 10, well, they've been able to get those explosives, and they converted 3rd and 10s on you. So that's what I said. The Vikings agreed with me. They did it, and then they got punished because it ended up in a 3rd and 9. But the broadcast showed it wrong before. They showed 3rd and 11, and then they went to a commercial, I think. And when they came back, it was 3rd and 9. So when it was 3rd and 11, and I was like, aha, they saved a yard. I was right. Ha. And then it was 3rd and 9. I was like, oh no, I was wrong by a yard. Very fun stuff. But yeah, that I guess is, I like the idea of making them turtle, but I get it if you're just going, don't take your very good 2nd down play and make them convert on 3rd and 10. I don't think they got the 3rd and 9 anyways, for whatever it's worth. Claude Ethan Brown asks, come playoff time, what aspect of this team scares you the most? What could cause a collapse? Why are we like this, man? Why do we always do it? Every time there's something good, it's like, how's it going to end? It's not going to end yet. It can't until January, man. Like, we got a whole month and a half before this happens. We don't need to think that far ahead. But since you asked, the primary weakness of this team is turnovers. They can't take care of the ball. You could have a turnover catastrophe game and lose a playoff game on that. But the thing doesn't need to collapse for you to lose. It doesn't need to be a house of cards, total meltdown, disastrous, absolute, they don't need to lose 52-10 to lose. They can have a pretty good game and then just get a little bit outplayed. It could be like the Vikings-Lions game was this year, where the Vikings played reasonably good ball. The Lions were just a little bit better. And, they got you by a last-second field goal. That could be how it is. And then you're looking at a million things. You're going, well, maybe there's a fourth down decision that is what undid them. Or there's a singular turnover that undid them. Or a dropped interception. Or, the 4th and 1 they couldn't quite get. Like, there could be a million different things that technically could be their deal. But you wouldn't call those a collapse. The playoffs are hard. That's a good team. And you only get one chance to beat them. We'll ask about Fabian Moreau and a whole bunch of other stuff next up on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. At FanDuel, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That means any new customer can come in and drop $5 on whatever you want. Right now, the Eagles against the Panthers are minus 650 to win. You get absolutely no juice on that bet at all, on that $5 bet. But if you win and it's your first bet, you can get 30-1 on that easy bet, assuming the Eagles actually do beat the Panthers or whatever it is that you find. You can get all kinds of stuff all in one place on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, including everything you need to place live bets. You can get a hunch in the middle of a game, check out live stats, live play-by-play, and everything you need all in one place. You can make the right decision. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Moving right along here with the Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. I would love it if you would check me out on patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. If you want to watch my video on Reisner and Ingram, it's on there. That's free to watch. You want to watch my video on the 2-minute stuff and how hurry up is affecting them. That is also free to watch on there. And I think a Sam Darnold video is coming, maybe something about the blitz. I should mention, that is something I forgot to mention yesterday, is the effect that the blitzes was having on the Vikings was pretty intense. That Sam Darnold was struggling to get his hots out. I'm going to talk, I think, a little bit more about that tomorrow in some depth, so we'll save that. For now, let's move on to a question from Mar Svihel. I'm so sorry if Svihel. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Who asks, would Caleb Evans have played better than Moreau yesterday? And why didn't we expose Moreau or Nahshon Wright to waivers instead of Evans? First question first, would Caleb Evans have been better than Moreau? It's hard to know. I don't know what Caleb Evans has in the tank this year. It changed drastically last year. He was playing totally fine football until he wasn't. And then he fell apart, and it seems like he never got that back because he was buried on this depth chart. And he was behind Fabian Moreau on the depth chart the whole time. So the Vikings' answer to that question is no. Caleb Evans would not have been better, and that's why we cut him instead of Fabian Moreau, because you don't cut CB4 when you can cut CB5. Nahshon Wright is on the practice squad, so exposing him to waivers doesn't do it. He wasn't in the actual competition. And Caleb Evans had lost his special teams role. He lost his gunner role. So why even be active, right? He's now become the healthy scratch, the disposable guy, and that's why he that's why he was the one that got exposed. They did want him back on the practice squad, if I recall, and he got claimed by the Panthers, which they're the first team in the order, right? So he got claimed right away. So that is sort of letting a guy go that a lot of teams still see value in. I don't think they're seeing him the same way that, say, the Vikings look at someone like Nahshon Wright, who is a practice squad elevation. But it's also kind of, it's over. When that happens, when they say, yeah, we're going to expose you to waivers, we're actually okay with you not even being on the team. And if you get claimed, you get claimed. I don't know. If I'm a Caleb Evans, I'm probably pretty good with a fresh start after that. That means the relationship is deteriorating at best. Tyler Spence asks, how does someone accurately assess secondary coverage during a game? Moreau obviously gave up a lot of production, but watching live and on replay, he was right there and in phase like every play. Outside of a huge DPI, which is bad, and a touchdown, which is bad too, I thought he was good. I mean, look, outside of that, how was the play, right? You've recognized the right thing, and I do think it's kind of unfair to corners that you can have, 50 good plays, but you get judged on your 2 bad ones. It's the reality. It's an unfair reality, but it's what it is. But when it comes to man coverage especially, which we got a lot of against Arizona, so it was a nice, easy one. We know everybody's role is, right? You're not guessing when it comes to zone and what were you supposed to do there, which is way harder. But when it comes to Moreau, I'm with you. I thought he was in pretty good position. And even the touchdown that was over him, over the Marvin Harrison one I think you're talking about, he was in great position on that. That pass had to be good. And that's the way that the kind of the barometer that I like to use as a way of kind of grounding my thinking. It's like the more you know about corner technique and how people are supposed to open their hips and what the steps they're taking and why they're taking them, which I mean, I could do 17 episodes on that, right? And still not say everything that there is out there. There's clinics on clinics about that. But the more of those, of that information that you have, in terms of, think of it like with a cornerback in man coverage, one of your goals is to maintain your cushion, right? If you start with a 3-yard cushion, let's say you're in a fairly tight alignment, and the receiver wants to chew into those 3 yards. He wants to go into those 3 yards. Well, you kind of want to backpedal and maintain that 3-yard distance so that when he releases, when he breaks his stem off one way or another, you have the 3 yards of cushion you needed to see it, to break on it, to do what you're going to do against it. So that's part of it. But really a barometer for me is asking not how if the pass was complete or not, right? I'm not, you're not trying to chart each one of these objectively, but more ask, how good did that pass have to be? If that pass had to be perfect, it's pretty easy for me to not be bothered if it was perfect. Because it's like, well, yeah, but it had to be, so that coverage was actually pretty good. And I think that Marvin Harrison touchdown, that throw had to be a dart. Like that thing had to be an absolute strike. And it was. Good for you. But it's not as bothersome to me versus, he missed that, but boy, anything in the vicinity would have been caught. That's not as good a coverage. And I think that's a heuristic. That's a good, like, mental math kind of back of the envelope way to think about it when you're watching on TV, especially, is go, how good did that throw have to be for that to be completed? And then not really caring if it was or was not completed. That's out of your control. Because at a certain point, there's no defense for the perfect pass, right? But did it have to be perfect? Then you did all you could. Blimby asks, can you think of a Vikings gaffe that rises to the level of failing to take a timeout to lose the game? I'm assuming, Blimby, you're talking about the Bears game, the Thanksgiving debacle, 30 seconds, they get one play off, terrible. Oh, like unbelievable stuff. My jaw hit the floor watching that. You can hear, I'm sure, all about it on Locked On Bears, which is heat right now. But a Vikings gaffe that lives up to it. I can rattle off a couple. I mean, come on, it's the Vikings. You got the Jim Marshall wrong way run, right? Now they would go on to win that game, but obviously that is a gaffe that is so bad it is keeping a shoe-in Hall of Famer, like an inarguable Hall of Fame resume. You cannot make a cogent argument that Jim Marshall should not be in the Hall of Fame, and he might not get in because his legacy is that run. Like, that is how powerful that gaffe was, even though they won the game. For more recent examples, you've got somebody in the response to that question, somebody responded with the Denny Green taking a knee to go to overtime, even though he had 3 timeouts, best offense in the league, 98 championship game, NFC championship game. John Boyce's Minnesota Vikings history documentary, which, I made one too a year before he did. I did mine on patreon.com/LukeBryanNFL. He came out with his. He actually came on the show. We talked about like the experience of studying Vikings history. Great episode. If you want something else to go listen to, you can go find that from last offseason. But I digress. In his documentary, he actually found a nugget that I missed when I did mine, which is that in like the post-game quotes, it's kind of Denny Green kind of gives up that he like had the wrong idea about how many timeouts he had. So he like lost track of the timeouts. It was like that bad of a gaffe. So very similar gaffe, right? Like a timeout related whoopsie doodle at the end of a game that ends up being horrible, except that one was in the NFC Championship. You could do like 12 men in the huddle in 2009, but I think that's just like a penalty, like a poorly timed penalty, but that's not a gaffe on the level of you picked up the ball and ran the wrong way, or you forgot how many timeouts there were. But I don't think anything will ever live up to missing the draft pick in 2003. I think getting jumped by the Jags and the Panthers because you couldn't get another card filled out in time after a trade with the Ravens fell through at the last second is just insane. Even though they came up with Kevin Williams on that. Oh boy, that's like a legacy now. I mean, that really defined Mike Tice's reputation for the rest of his time as a coach. People thought of him as the coach, somehow kind of associated that gaffe with him because they didn't really have like a true GM type really anymore. And they just kind of let the head coach do it because that's what Denny did before him. And then Mike Tice was just kind of synonymous with that issue. Draw Goblin asks, what is your beef with the Duck? The Duck knows what he did. If the Duck tells you he doesn't know what he did, then the Duck is lying to you. The Duck. Kirko in Chains asks, with the knowledge that Kirk has of the Brian Flores defense and the recent calls for Penix after a rough stretch, I think we're due for a 2018 Rams game repeat on Sunday. How bad is this taking to age by Monday? I don't know what you mean by a 2018 Rams game repeat. Is that a good game? Because I don't think that's the best Kirk game. If that's what you're just trying to come up with a good one. Like the Vikings didn't even win that game. But sure, okay. There's now there's talk because Cousins is coming off a 4 interception meltdown. You throw 4 picks, you start talking about the backup, right? The Vikings experienced that twice last year. We know how that feels. So that's a catastrophe game. Does he have his bounce back against the Vikings? Who is to say? You know what? We got the rest of the week to talk about Kirk Cousins and his return to US Bank Stadium. We'll, of course, talk to Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons later in the week, do our bold predictions and over-under and all of that stuff. And then tomorrow, we'll talk more about probably some of that blitz stuff, the O-line, protection issues, and how Sam Darnold did on the whole. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull